football folks doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Ready to get into it?
Yeah.
All right. We're going team by team.
I would be very careful about slinging stuff.
Am I going to get sued?
You got legal on this?
Let's send you out on the right note. PFF sucks. Have a great day, everybody.
Wow.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube Monday morning, recapping all things NFL scouting combine. How you doing, Sam?
I'm alive. It felt like the last couple of days of Indy was just trying to get out of the city without catching something, right? A la the Super Bowl, right? Everyone got sick, and then it felt like the Indy is so close off the back of the Super Bowl. Everyone's still reeling from whatever they caught at the Super Bowl. So particularly the last couple of days, almost everybody I spoke to was battling something, right? The late Austin Gale, I said bye to him on the Friday. He was fighting through something, and I'm like, love you, just, 6 feet distance. Just I don't want to catch whatever you got. You know what I mean? Well, so the last couple of days were just like dodge a disease.
Yeah, tell me about it. I failed. I mean,
where you were locked in rooms, like you had no escape route. I could, at least run to a different part of the room.
I picked up strep while I was out there, and I think it was, I don't know if that takes a couple days to hit you, because my son had it back home 2 days after I got to Indy, so I don't know if I could get it from him from before or whatever, but I was shut down the second half of Indy.
Strep's rough. I had that
Adult
a long
strep
time ago.
is no joke. They don't tell you about this.
Yeah. No, I had that early 20s, I guess, so back in the late 1850s.
Yeah.
Not fun.
Years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I had it draft weekend too, so that's twice within the last year, and I was done, man.
Nice.
I couldn't make it to the doctor all day Thursday. I could not get out of bed.
Yeah.
Knowing that if I could just make it, if I could just Uber.
There's drugs.
To the urgent care.
There's the steroid shot.
I'll be on the mend, Yeah. And I couldn't do it. I woke up at 8, and I kept falling back to sleep and didn't make it till about 2. Had to cancel my flight to Sloan.
Yeah.
But made a dramatic reappearance.
Dramatic recovery.
At the Sloan analytics panel. They were scrambling to try to replace me, of course. But
I didn't get a phone call.
I thought they should have. They should have flown you in.
Right.
But I woke up
be? Friday
morning, booked a flight for Friday night to make it to the panel on Saturday afternoon.
Nice.
So it's just a long, eventful week. I like to tell those stories. They're kind of, I think they're fun because our friend Brett Coleman showed up to the combine. He said it was his first combine, and he walked in, and he was there for 10 minutes. He's like, "This is not what I thought the combine was."
Right.
It's the number of NFL people who are saturated in 3 places, and I think people of our standing, you don't want to leave because you don't know who you're going to talk to, run into, what you're going to learn, connections you're going to make, whatever it might be. So people end up staying up till 2, 3, 4 in the morning just in case you have that one great conversation.
It is interesting that. Like, I wonder. I mean, he's sort of vaguely plugged in to NFL, the world. He's more or less in the same ecosphere as we are, just without the sort of official commitments that drag into places like the Combine, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody like Brett is like, wow, this is completely not what I thought it was, like what are we not conveying to our listeners that we should be conveying about what the hell that week actually is? Because this is now like 10 years worth of Combines for us between the team side of things and the media side of things. And I was saying before we went on, you and I are now in different worlds in this, at least were this year and have been for a couple of years, where your primary function, theoretically, is a product manager on the team side of stuff at PFF,
right,
and you do the podcast like a side gig, right? Whereas I'm principally the podcast, and then I do writing and stuff as a side gig. So I'm all content. So when we do these weeks, you get taken away and locked in a room with all the people that nobody knows the name of at PFF from the outside,
Right.
The guys that work on stuff behind the scenes, and you're talking to teams and blah, blah, blah. And then I'm front and center as the media side of PFF. So usually on a table in Radio Row, not this year. I'm doing, shows and radio hits and blah, blah, blah. But it's like we don't see each other essentially during the week, except at night when everyone is like, all right, the day's done. Now we got to go find people to talk to that we, catch up with old friends or have conversations or whatever.
Yeah. So I like to tell the listeners, and then some of the listeners, of course, every year they work for NFL teams, and we get this reminder that Joe Schmo from an NFL team.
Joe Schmo.
Yeah, just making up names. From an NFL team will be like, hey, heard you fix our team last week. Hey, heard you, ran into one of the pro scouts. And he was like, no, I didn't like any of your pro scouting recommendations that you gave us. So it was great.
It is a little concerning sometimes, the people that out themselves as listeners,
I know.
Because you just gotta, we've been doing this for so long that we still, I think, generally take the attitude of it's just basically the same content it was when nobody was listening. You know what I mean?
Right.
And now it's like, crap, real people are listening that actually talk to you about that again down the line.
And then we also try to find that balance of, we know we have new listeners. We know we have new listeners who have said that they've not learned football from us or whatever, but kind of like gotten into the game from listening to the podcast. I love hearing those stories. I heard a few of those this week. And then again, you've got people that are, at the executive level listening and trying to keep up with the NFL too. So we also try to bring that balance to everybody,
right,
knowing the different types of listeners and viewers.
So today we're going to do kind of winners and losers from the Combine, but also if the chat wants to fire in any and all general Combine questions, we can answer those too.
Yeah, I would love the Combine questions. I think Drew Forsyth is a pretty common commenter in the live chat, and he was asking about how do you respond to people who discredit the process of the Combine. Can I start with something real quick?
Yeah.
This weekend was the Combine was fun. The Xavier Worthy thing was fun. The Joe Milton deep ball was fun.
Right.
And so,
do you think that it's at that? So remember, for years, nobody was in that building, right? It was empty outside of the 7 or so people that they allow in there, like, Greg Cosell and that kind of thing, right? Other than that, it's deathly quiet. Now, there's an audience, there's a crowd. So when Xavier Worthy runs a 4.21 or when Joe Milton just uncorks a 70-yard bomb, there's a buzz. Like, the crowd gets into it.
Yeah, I think McAfee was on, when he was on with Rich and Daniel Jeremiah, and he was like, there is a buzz. There is an energy in the stadium, and I think that's great. And I would just I'm hoping as agents get further and further into the process, and they're like, don't run, do pro day, do controlled environment. That's been going on for years. I'm hoping the players continue to step up and compete. Not because because it's fun. Like those were memorable moments that might have nothing to do with Xavier Worthy's NFL career, Joe Milton's NFL career, but memorable Combine moments. I love that.
This was the first year, by the way, where I started to wonder if that actually has a material effect on the data. Like, how much is the crowd actually able? Because everyone, professional athletes, right? You guys always talk about, I never played in front of a large enough crowd for this to be a factor, but everyone talks about how the crowd, there's an energy off the crowd. When the crowd gets into it, you feel that. There's a reason home field is an advantage. It's not because of, your locker. It's because there's 60,000 people in the stadium chanting for your side, not the other side. It makes a difference. And particularly in free-flowing games, I think, basketball, soccer, anything that's moving constantly, it ebbs and flows. But when the crowd gets into it on your side, it makes a difference to your team. So when there's a crowd in the building versus not, how much does that affect a guy running a 40, when that guy's fast and there's anticipation? Or a Joe Milton, does he get 2 extra yards because the crowd's into it? I actually genuinely, for the first time this year, wondered, does Worthy get 4.21 without the crowd being in that building?
I appreciate you pointing to me as a professional athlete who's played in front of crowds, but I think you and I might be in a similar boat here. My top crowd is probably about 15,000.
That's about at least, I would say, minimum 14,000 more than I played it. Probably a lot more than that.
I will say, personally, I was able to get up for spring training games where there was no fans. It was just whatever it was. But I do wonder, Joe Milton plays in front of 100,000 at Tennessee. These guys are used to having a crowd, right? Sure. So I imagine once you're used to having that crowd energy and then you go back to the empty stadium, maybe it does have an effect. I'll say the other part too, they've done a better job, I think, of making the workouts. They're putting mostly in the afternoon. They're not, I don't know if they're still waking the guys up at 5 a.m. for a drug test, and then they do interviews, and then they bench press. They would stack their day. So by the time they were running drills and everything, they're completely worn out.
Right.
I think they're sorting that a little bit better. The bench press is the day after. Not that that's going to take everything out of you, but they're just being a little bit smarter about how the drills go. So I'm assuming that's going to have a bit of an uptick, I think, in some of the results. But I think you're right about the stadium aspect of it. So I just hope players continue to get out there and compete and just for the fun of it. Joe Milton dropping it in a bucket. I saw Lance Erline tweeting it out and was like, wow, this is awesome. And everybody's like, oh, he can't hit can't hit the side of a barn in a game. It's like, great.
Yeah.
We're not talking about this. Was just a great moment at the combine. That was fun. Like, let's just have fun.
Yeah, I mean, Milton's the kind of person whose arm is so insane that even if you were told he will never become anything in the NFL, like, let's just stipulate this right up front. This is not an NFL prospect. And I'm not saying he isn't. But if that was what you were told going into that, it would still be fun to watch the man throw a football. It's like when you were out there and you almost put a dent in the sheet metal, right? It's fascinating from somebody like my perspective.
Thank you.
Who doesn't have that. And I'm saying this as somebody, I no longer have any fear of your fastball throwing a baseball, but for some reason,
football, maybe.
With a football, you still have juice, right? And I was legitimately worried that you would dent the sheet metal in the thing that we had to return to the Eckrich people when we had that, right? That's fascinating, just watching somebody that can do that as someone that can't. Like, watching Joe Milton throw a football is amazing because that guy has one of the top 5 arms I've ever seen in my life. Like, he can just fire the thing, both velocity and distance. And if you were told this is the last time we'll see this human being, it would still be fun to watch him throw at the combine.
Is 2024 bringing exciting or unexpected changes to your life? Well, here's a secret weapon to help you face those challenges with more confidence. It's a great term life insurance policy. That's right. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to protect your family's financial future so you can focus on what's ahead, knowing your family is protected if something else unexpected happens. Fabric was designed by parents for parents to help you get a high-quality, surprisingly affordable term life insurance policy in less than 10 minutes. Fabric has flexible policies that fit your family and your budget, like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Get your personalized quote in just minutes and then apply when it's convenient for you. It's all online and on your schedule. You can go from start to covered in less than 10 minutes with no health exam required. So join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. MEET fabric.com/PFFNFL. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Insurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions.
So let's start with Xavier Worthy as people that helped themselves at the combine.
He runs an official 4.21 NFL combine record, and he just looked really fast. I thought some of the things that you were breaking down, him versus John Ross, and
well, they did they have that simulcam, right, where they run it. They overlay one person's 40 against another's. It was fascinating because Xavier Worthy smoked John Ross out of the gate, right? And remember when it happened live, Daniel Jeremiah said the guy's start was amazing. Like, that was the thing that made him sit up and take notice was, whoa, the start. He absolutely gapped Ross out of the gate, and Ross almost ran him down. But when you look at the 10-yard splits, like, Worthy's not, I don't think he's top 3. He's not slow, but he didn't have the fastest, wow, that start was one of the most amazing things ever, which suggests to me that John Ross ran a 4.22 with a bad start in the 40, which honestly makes that pretty insane.
Ross might just have pure speed. I mean, that's the interesting thing about the 40, right? Again, not to personalize this, but just to explain it. I used to train for the combine with NFL
so
combine hopefuls. So I know. No, I'm only saying I saw guys come in December and leave in February with like 0.2 shaved off their 10 time.
Right.
I saw just from being good at the start. Right. So when we say, fast guys run fast and everything, yeah, it's right. I mean, most guys, you're not going from like a 4.9 to a 4.3. But just that technique in the 10, and all we practiced was the 10 over and over and over again, because then you just keep running after that, right? And you run. And now, of course, there's even better track coaches and training for this and everything. But there's if you nail the start and you're fast, you have what Xavier Worthy did.
So one of the most interesting things this year and maybe recently is all the new GPS stuff is you're starting to get extra layers of information into all these drills, right? And the 40, it used to just be like you get the 40 time, you get the 10 split, the end of story. Now you're getting like miles per hour at the 5-yard mark, right? So you're getting that instant acceleration thing, and you're seeing total miles per hour, like what they topped out as. Because speed to me has always been an interesting thing. It's not a linear thing. I've always thought about it in terms of there are 3 phases of being fast, right? There is instant acceleration, 0 to 5. I didn't have that. There is 5 to close to top speed, the acceleration phase, that's where I was fast. And then there's top speed, didn't have that really either. I was not slow, but I didn't. That was my. Those two weren't my speed. My speed was the acceleration phase. So you need a sort of way of measuring each one of those because they're all relevant depending on what it is you're doing. So for this, Worthy evidently has instant acceleration. He's got the 0 to 5 thing down. And then John Ross has the top speed and maybe the acceleration phase as well, built off that. But, I mean, obviously Worthy, fast as hell. When you run a combine record, you are enhancing your reputation regardless of what happens.
Yeah.
He did, however, check in at 165 pounds, which was probably 10 lower than people thought he was going to be.
That's the part I was surprised about. Again, I throw Mike Wallace comps around like
left, right, and center, just
like
firing
Skittles.
right there. Yeah,
you know, there's a lot of them. He was my annual Mike Wallace comp,
which I hated, by the way.
You didn't like my comp?
Don't like it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I just thought super fast, takes the top off the defense, fights the ball a little bit as a kid.
Here's one for you. Now, here's where it gets interesting because speed totally different. But I thought he had a lot of Jordan Addison to him. And if you imagine Jordan Addison but running a 4.2 40, that's pretty special.
Can you give your annual comping is not equating?
Correct. Comping. You can comp anything you like. Comparison, if you read the dictionary definition of a comparison, right? It stipulates similarities and differences. So
differences. Comparison is simply... But we usually say compare and contrast to emphasize the...
Yeah, because people can't deal with the English language.
We've rewritten the definition.
Right. A comparison is simply taking two things and talking through their similarities and differences. It does not say this thing is the same as this thing. So you can invoke whatever you like in comparison to anything else you like, and it's fine as long as you're not equating them. Anyway, my point being, I thought his game reminded me a lot of Jordan Addison's, but with more speed. Now, I also think Addison's 40 time is not necessarily reflective of how fast he is in game, but still.
But remember, we said last year we were very cautious not to drop too many of our in-game speed nuggets and everything last year. This year we've got more ability to do that. You know, so last year I remember I said Addison, what did he run in the 4.5s? It was like a 4.5 flat or something. But he had a faster game speed that Quentin Johnston.
That's what I mean.
And some of the other guys, right? So I'm going to drop a nugget right here.
Here we go. 4.49, yeah, 4.5 flat.
So I'm going to drop a nugget right here. So the computer vision and player tracking data that we have, we've got data on what's a guy's max speed, which is interesting, but there's error in some of this, right? So you might get a bad play here and there.
Right.
So we've sorted it by the top 5. Like, what are the top 5 reads we've gotten as far as max speeds over the last couple of years? And so in this draft class, like when Xavier Worthy ran fast, I'm like, I get it. I've been seeing him atop these speed numbers the last couple of years. And Worthy's number 2 in the draft class as far as the average of his top 5 max speeds. Worthy's number 2. You know who number 1 is?
I do, but only because you finally hooked me up with that.
Because I sent it to you. I thought I had. Number 1 is Malik Neighbors.
Yes.
From LSU. And
so again, did not run this week.
What's that?
Wasn't there this week.
Who didn't run. So Xavier Worthy breaks the record at the combine, 4.21, and the game speed is there. Absolutely. And it was just interesting to me as I'm resorting this whole thing, looking at, wow, Malik Neighbors is just a tick above average max speed, just a tick above Xavier Worthy over the last 2 years. Decent sample size. The caveat with all of these speeds and everything, we're tracking them on every play for college. And the more go balls you run, the more opportunity you have to run fast. We're not necessarily adjusting for that. We have an athleticism score off that, which is somewhat opportunity driven and not always adjusted for. But it's just trying to say, here's what this guy did. And I thought it was interesting to see Neighbors, who runs, the million slot fades and everything, hitting a slightly higher top speed a little bit more often than Xavier Worthy. And so I'm not trying to take anything away from Worthy. That was spectacular. He looks like an incredible runner, like track runner. Yeah. You talk about the start, the form, everything about him. I think he's a legitimate deep threat. I'm not breaking, any news with that, what Worthy did. I just thought that the guy that didn't run, by the way, Neighbors, had a higher average top 5 back speed and, probably just another little notch in his belt as a potential top 5 pick, Malik Neighbors.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you could convince me that the shoulder shrugging thing that he does at the line of scrimmage, the shoulder release, I think Steve Smith has called it, is something that gets fixed very quickly, I think you can make a an argument that he is. You could make an argument that he's there with Marvin Harrison Jr. Like if you could tell me that that's not going to be a factor at the NFL level, I absolutely think there's a live argument that he's as good a prospect as Marvin Harrison Jr. But I don't know. So Xavier Worthy, absolutely a winner of the week with that insane time. His teammate, Adonai Mitchell, Adonai, they called him Adonai the whole way, and yet everyone else had seemed to have made this pact to just say AD.
Yeah, I heard Trevor say AD first and kind of followed his lead.
And then everyone started doing it. So it felt
I don't think he was first.
It felt like there was a sort of, mutual agreement amongst everybody that we're now calling him AD.
Is
and
it
then
Twitter,
the broadcast,
is it Adonai, is
right.
it AD?
Then the broadcast all the way through was Adonai. So I'm going back to Adonai for the moment. But anyway, instead of being 165, Adonai weighs in at 205 and runs a 4.34. Now, also, 1.52 10-yard split. That's pretty freaking fast. 39.5-inch vertical, 11'4" broad jump. Basically, 90th plus percentile in everything at 205 pounds. I think both, it wasn't just Worthy. He's going to get all the ink because of the record, but both Texas wide receivers had crazy workouts.
Yeah, really incredible workout because he was already being discussed as a fringe first rounder. He's one of the many receivers that we've, maybe pinged for the Chiefs or the Niners at the end of the first round. So I think does that solidify him in the first?
Yes, absolutely.
Where are the percentiles on that? Like you said, over 90th in pretty much everything. We saw his athleticism. You've seen his athleticism on tape throughout all of his time, hanging in the air for that back shoulder touchdown in the college football playoff. But yeah, we've got his weight wrong in here.
Do we?
Well, I'm just the one we just loaded into our measurables page. He's not 235.
No, he's not.
But yeah, the speed and all the explosiveness. I'm not gonna say he's Jordan Addison because he's got many pounds on him. But Addison had nuance to his route running and everything that I see with AD Mitchell quite a bit. I see his shoulder shrugs at the right time in the route, trying to set defenders up.
He reminded me of CeeDee Lamb, and it reminded me so obviously of CeeDee Lamb that I felt silly bringing it up.
I thought you guys were crazy because Brett may have said the same thing.
Brett Coleman had that comp before.
I thought you guys were crazy.
He's got a whole video on him, I think.
Maybe I'll go back and try to hear that a little bit.
Well,
more.
so I put that out there eventually. I was like, he's clearly CeeDee Lamb, and people were hammering me like, he doesn't have CeeDee Lamb's. Now he doesn't like
the yak ability.
Yeah, he doesn't have CeeDee Lamb's version of that, but CeeDee Lamb had a comical yak ability. Like he had a bunch of plays in college, ironically against Texas, where you're like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, how does he beat 7 tackles and still keep rumbling to the end zone? Like, it was ridiculous. So sure, he doesn't have that. He does, however, I think have pretty good yak ability.
This is where using data and understanding context and how to use data, right? So I'm looking at Mitchell's page. We're talking AD Mitchell from Texas here.
Yeah.
He's a 6th percentile yak receiver out of a sample of 717 since 2014, guys that have gone on to the NFL. Now, why is that?
By what? What's the measure?
Just yak per reception.
Okay.
He's got 3.2 in his career. I'm sorry, that was just 2023. I'm not going to click off of it, but that's the way his career was. Pretty low yak. But it's because he's been targeted down the field mostly. Right. So it's somewhat, yak is opportunity driven,
sure.
Right? I'm not breaking new ground here, but it's a good reminder because a lot of people will just throw the stat out there. Here's his yak, here's his this, here's his that. The higher your average depth of target goes, the lower your yak ability or opportunity. So with AD Mitchell, you just haven't seen it.
It's about the same for his career.
Okay. That's what I thought. That's why I said it, and
yep.
I remember looking at it before. So I remember watching him thinking, I don't see the yak ability, but is that because it's just is it unavailable, or is he just not good at it?
Average depth of target for his career is 15.6.
Yeah,
that's
insane.
5 yards longer than most receivers.
Right. So that's insane for what you usually get there. So that's another interesting one, and that's where the scouting aspect of it and how you use it. Because I don't know what you remember when you were watching Rashee Rice last year. Did you think, man, just get the ball in his hands and he's yak central, right? To me, he was a little bit more.
No, I thought he was a good.
Else.
I thought he was a good yards after the catch guy. Rashee Rice is his own thing. We'll get to later. I talked to Trev during the combine about Rashee Rice, and okay, we might as well hit it here. Rashee Rice was my player last year where I liked him, but everything I wrote down about him was a negative, almost. You know what I mean? And you get those guys every year where, and we talked about him a lot, that he was this enigma of a receiver, that his game didn't necessarily make sense relative to what he was good at or what they were asking him to do. It was a strange disconnect. And we were like, if he goes to the right team and they kind of say, hey, stop focusing on this, instead do this, there's a really good receiver there. But it was a question. Now, the player this year that I like irrationally when all of the notes I have are negative is Keon Coleman. And it didn't occur to me until me and Trev were hashing this out on the show that maybe Keon Coleman can be Rashee Rice, where you're like, okay, I don't know why. I can't articulate correctly why I think Keon Coleman is a good receiver, because there's a lot of bad in his profile, like the overall picture. There's a lot of problems. The statistical profile is weak, whole bunch of things. And then he goes out there and runs a 4.6 in the 40. You're like, come on, you're just not giving me anything to hang my hat on. But it feels a little bit like Rashee Rice, where I think I know everything I'm writing down, most of it is negative, but I still feel like there's stuff to work with here. And I had a tweet that went fairly crazy over the weekend where he ran the gauntlet drill, and he was regularly hitting 20 miles per hour across the gauntlet drill. I didn't see anybody else hit 20 over the course of the whole thing.
I wanted to bring that up.
And he was dead straight down the line. He wasn't out of control. He didn't deviate. He caught the ball well. And then right at the end, the last pass that was thrown to him was sort of underthrown inside and like turned him the wrong way than you want to turn when you're about to hit the sideline and go upfield. So he couldn't like stop in a yard and, make the turn up the sideline, which some people were criticizing him for. But my point being, there was a really interesting contrast between, okay, the guy runs a 4.6, but in a drill that is effectively trying to emulate in-game situations, right? You run a dig, you're working across the middle of the field, you're looking at the quarterback, you're finding a pass. Can you do that without slowing down? And he hit a higher speed of that than anybody. So, and yet it's different because you look at the sort of the miles per hour stuff, like your in-game athleticism thing, he's not going to score particularly high because that's finding guys that run go routes effectively, right? A lot of the time. So it's a very specific way that Keon Coleman's game speed is higher than his time speed, but I still feel like there's a player in there.
That's what I wanted to ask you and bring up about data in general, because I'm thinking of this through what do we do with all the new information standpoint. I thought your breakdown of what was he 20th in the 40? Did you say? And then best in the gauntlet.
I don't know. He was just a 4.6. I didn't figure out where that stacked. And
then of course last year's fastest gauntlet was Puka Nacua.
Right.
So we as humans just like to think like this, right? We have a new data point. We have a new thing that we never calculated before. And the guy who was best at it last year had one of the best rookie seasons ever. Therefore, it's pretty easy to assume that the gauntlet must, translate for everybody in a linear fashion. And we've said the same thing. We have our own Puka propaganda, right? 99.7th percentile in-game athleticism, or our game athleticism rating, GAR. I think that's how we're trying to brand this thing. But anyway, that was where Puka was last year. And it's easy to be like, well, we've got this new calculation, let's use it. But we still don't really know what any of that means. And that's what I'm fascinated by is the new measures, right? Like theoretically what you said and what you tweeted out, that the gauntlet is a game-like situation where speed there matters way more than speed in the 40.
So I was curious. I'd only looked for him in the max speed things, right? I was just curious what your overall GAR, or is that the same thing as athleticism percentile?
Yeah.
Okay, so your athleticism percentile for Keon Coleman, based off all the overall tracking data this year, is 85.6.
Oh, see, I'm seeing a different number right now.
Perfect. So
no, just in my spread, it just hasn't updated maybe in the spreadsheet.
But you're taking a guy. So my point being, you look at Keon Coleman, you say 4.6. He's not an athlete, right? And yet the overall picture starts to build a better composite and says, yeah, actually, he's like an 86th percentile athlete. That's pretty good.
Yeah, and by the way, what we've seen so far from our GAR, our athleticism score rating.
If we are saying that, we can't say GAR.
I told them not to make it GAR.
Yeah,
I told them not to.
Oh, we'll send them the clip of this, and then they'll
Can you
know.
guys hear this out loud?
Yeah, exactly.
I thought my ATH score was great. ATH score.
It's better than GAR.
Yeah. It's no big time throw, but
No.
it's something. Basically, more isn't always better, right? That's how we like to think of metrics, right? If you have more of it, it's always better, right? If you have 36-inch arms, it's better than 35, better than 34.
It's also it's I think it's descriptive more than just you want to be up at the top.
Well,
right?
A lot of it is the rating thing that we have is really good at pointing to NFL players. It's basically saying pull from this pool, or the pool that you're pulling from, is it the right guys? It's not as simple as, and again, it's easy for us to be like, Puka, we knew Puka, 99.7. Get this number, use it. But it's really, are you pulling from the right pool? And historically, guys that are below a certain standard in game athleticism type of measures, that's where that's where those are more red flags than green flags. Than the high one is a green flag. Anyway, what I'm saying about the gauntlet thing is, I'm just interested to see if that becomes a thing that continues to translate. But this is going to happen every year in the draft, right? I'm going to give a quick warning. The S2 test last year, our friends, you're the co-founder of S2.
Can we talk about that on our show? Since Mike Lombardi.
Just give me one second.
Finish your point.
I'll finish the point, and then we'll tell the ridiculous story. But the S2 test last year, right? Our brains are like, we have this new measure, and now we're going to do it. Now we got quarterback solved, right? S2, found Purdy.
Uh-huh.
And then Stroud, misses it out. Now it's like S2's terrible, right? So in-game athleticism measures and speed in the gauntlet, I don't think we're just going to find this new holy grail. This is the thing you look at every single year. So just don't get caught up in that. But they are interesting new data points that we're going to learn more information about. That's all.
Yeah, and to just kind of recap the whole S2 cycle that we've just had. S2, obviously, there was a lot of data points. It found Brock Purdy. He was a 90-something percentile S2 guy, which put him up there with Drew Brees and whatever. And so last year, we had those guys on the show, and we talked to them about what exactly it is. They still want to put us through the S2, by the way. At some point, we should do that.
I'm going to tank it like CJ.
Yeah. So anyway, then obviously last year's cycle happened, and there were leaks on CJ Stroud's S2 score, which I think the first time was an 18th percentile, and then apparently he took it again and got a 6. Anyway, they got leaked. Oh, so Stroud's got a terrible S2 score, beware type of thing, right? And then obviously Stroud, rookie of the year, looks amazing, looks like one of the best rookie quarterback seasons we've ever seen. And it's like, S2's garbage. It's the new Wonder Lake. It doesn't mean anything. Get rid of it. It's a waste of time. There's agencies out there going, we're not even going to let our guys do it. Why would we? It's just going to damage them. That S2 score from the outset was flagged as not real, right? Because part of the thing is you have to actually care about doing the test. So if you show up there and you're like, I don't want any part of this, you just go through the motions. The point being, CJ Stroud turned up and didn't essentially try for the test,
right?
And got an 18. And then apparently somebody made him do it again, and he scored even worse. Which was like when I did Latin and knew that I wasn't going to have to do Latin beyond the second year. So my 2 Latin percentiles. Your agent
told you not to do Latin.
Exactly. So I got 42 and then 26, right? It wasn't because I couldn't. It was because I just knew I was never going to do it again for the rest of my life. So why bother? That's what CJ Stroud did for the S2 test.
And now you know all of this information.
And NFL
S2.
teams knew that as well, right? So those guys contract with half the NFL teams. They had told them internally, this is not a real number. Don't put any stock in it. But last year, agent lying season, et cetera, somebody leaked it. And so those guys are taking flack arrows from everywhere, being like, S2 sucks. But actually the thing, if you were working with them, you would have known that that's not a real number. So it does. So my point being, we still don't know what the hell S2 tells you, because the one number everyone's focusing on is not real. Okay, now the story.
But you know all that stuff because
so
co-founder
somebody, sorry, I don't know the guy's name, but somebody tweeted at us, tagged us in the tweet. Michael Lombardi in his podcast, they went on a big rant about S2, the same idiot kind of stuff that you tend to get on that show. And Mike Lombardi says, of course you know who founded that. That's Sam Monson from PFF. So that tells you everything you need to know about S2. Well, okay. Number one, he didn't. So it tells you everything you need to know about your expertise on the subject matter, actually, Michael. I don't know why he thinks that. But
to quote the great Gorilla Monsoon.
This is somebody that's being...
I was quoting.
Sorry, go. Quote Gorilla.
Michael Lombardi is what he used to call Bobby the Brain. A fountain of misinformation.
Yeah, it's a good term.
How's that?
This is somebody that's been talked about previously as having like an eidetic memory. It's like this guy's a savant. He doesn't forget anything. Information goes in there and never comes out, right? He has managed to go from that as a reputational, weapon to he listened to a podcast one time where the guy was on our show and decided I co-founded S2.
Just amazing.
That's how his brain works.
I'm proud of you, though. I'm proud of you.
Thank you
for doing that.
I wish I had. Apparently, they contract like half the NFL teams. I'd be rolling in it.
Seriously. Man, what else? So what else we want to talk about here?
Okay, so other winners and losers. So, okay, I got one. Xavier Legette, I think, ended up being a winner. His first 40 was actually relatively slow. So Xavier Legette, remember, at the Senior Bowl, shows up, listed at 6'3".
South Carolina wide receiver.
Yes, sorry. Listed at 6'3", 225. Shows up at the Senior Bowl. Turns out he's only 6'1", 225. Which, changes some things. For a guy that's being talked about as, what's our cautionary tale every year? If the first thing you tell me about a player is contested catch skills, I'm quite scared immediately. Now, it's not a perfect rule because you would say that about Drake London. That would have been the first thing you said about Drake London come draft time, and he's one of the best I've ever seen at doing that.
But you'd have some other pretty good pluses right next to
You
it.
would, but it would be the first thing you would say, right? And I think Xavier Legette, it's the same thing, right? The first thing you think is insane at the catch point. Now, if immediately you're then, okay, but now he's 2 inches shorter than you thought he was, so maybe that catch radius is not overwhelming at the NFL level where the athletes are bigger, faster, stronger, etc. But you're like, okay, he is really fast as well, so that's going to help. Then he shows up. First 40, I think, was 4.49, and you're like, oh, it's just remember when Traylon Burks worked out and just every single number across the board was worse than it was supposed to be?
Yeah.
Suddenly, that was the picture we were starting to paint with Xavier Legette. But then he comes back in his second 40 time is 4.39, which at 225 pounds is still freaking blazing, or 221. He weighed in this time. 10-yard split, 1.54. That's really good. Vertical jump, 40 inches. That's legit. That's explosiveness is what he had. And I do think as well, when they started to run the drills and they started to do, the sideline fade stuff, the stuff that's kind of silly, but still, he is really, really good at the catch point. Like, he has that innate ability to understand how to high point the football, go up at its highest, point, bring it in where nobody else can get to it. He is still big, strong. He is fast. So for somebody that I think was starting to construct a picture of a little bit, smoke and mirrors, everything we saw wasn't quite real, I think he sort of brought it all around again by the end of it.
I want to talk holistically a little bit about the combine. There were some questions in there about how do you use this, and it's useless and whatever it might be. I think from a data perspective, they are just they're data points, and certain positions have a couple things. So I got them all printed out here. There's a couple that pop, right? Certain positions like tight end athleticism generally is really important. Theo Johnson from Penn State, he goes from he just becomes more of a guy because he crushed the combine and had a really good workout. And most of the best tight ends in the NFL over the last 10 to 15 years were really athletic, and there's something to it. But from a wide receiver perspective, I found this interesting looking at first round wide receivers. Their average 40 is 4.43 since 2014.
Yeah.
And then it's 4.44 in the second round. That drops to 4.46 in the third round, right? It starts to get a little bit slower as you get further.
Yeah,
and further.
The broadcast kind of does it in a similar but slightly different way, where the number they give for like the 40 is, well, what was the average of the top 10 best players in the NFL at this position last year? So like top 10 receivers, I assume just judged by yardage. But like top 10 receivers, your average number is like 4.43, right? So that's the number we're targeting here. Doesn't mean you can't be good if you're running a 4.6. Larry Fitzgerald, I think, had a 4.6, whatever. But it's giving you a target. And to me, it's like every draft element. There's something in it. Doesn't mean if you only use the combine, you're an idiot, right? But if you use it as a single piece of information, you say, okay, this changes something slightly, this confirms what I thought, this does whatever. So in the chat, really got motion, I assume is what that's supposed to be. Is Sam still high on Troy Franklin after the drills? Good question. So The answer is yes. I am still high on Troy Franklin. The drills did, however, adjust my opinion of him that maybe he isn't like a complete all-round receiver and you actually need to have him working certain specific routes, right? He's not going to be...
Why did he slalom the gauntlet?
I don't know. And he slalomed it the wrong way. Like he faded away from every pass instead of going towards them. Now, the last throw, I think, was one that caused that. The other 4 were not. And he did it twice. So I don't know. His drills were rough. So maybe you're now looking at a guy and saying, okay, he might not be able to do everything. But the things he can do, like he's a guy that's like at the top of your athleticism scores for running fast in a straight line. He can still take the top off of defense. He can still run shallow drags and take it to the house. He can still run a slant and put it in the end zone. You know, all these kinds of things. But maybe he doesn't do everything. Certainly not year one. So that's kind of what I'm saying is it's not like it doesn't change everything. You don't go, well, the man ran a rough slalom, so I now think Troy Franklin sucks. It's like, okay, he ran a rough slalom twice and did a couple other things that didn't look great. Maybe he's not the complete all-round receiver you thought he was, and maybe it changes sort of your opinion slightly of what he can be.
Jerry Rice was disgusted in his interview. I mean, I think the one concern for me is the idea of QB friendly, and this is just the nuanced part of receiver that I think we mention a lot. The Boston accent shows up. It was there this weekend, and it just pops every now and again. Yeah. But the QB, the idea of QB friendly, like you're not supposed to just run the dig, directly across the field. You want to come in, work back to the quarterback a little bit, right? Shorten the throw. Make sure that the DB cannot run through you to get to the ball. Like those are the types of plays where if you don't do it right, it's a turnover, right? Your quarterback is throwing an interception. That's the type of nuanced part of the game. Look at that. The nuanced part of the game that concerns me when I look at the drills. We got some breaking news.
Yes.
Do you want to break it?
No, you can break it.
Per Adam Schefter and probably others, per his agent, Derek Gilmore, actually, and I'm just reading Adam Schefter.
There you go.
5-time Pro Bowl wide receiver Mike Evans has reached agreement on a 2-year, $52 million deal that includes $35 million guaranteed with the Bucs. Going to remain a Buck, potentially a Buck for life. So Mike Evans back in Tampa Bay. Many people anticipated this, but we also said, well, they had this kind of deadline before the season. They didn't get there. Mike Evans, the biggest wide receiver name on the free agent market, despite being over 30 years old, incredibly consistent. Could any team use him? We were going through all the teams. Who could use Mike Evans? Everybody. But he'll be back in Tampa Bay.
Nice.
Dynamite drop in, Monty. That broadcasting school is really starting to pay off. I use that about once a year on you. Does that solidify? So then there were also heavy rumors coming out of the Combine. I think Daniel Jeremiah mentioning it on NFL Network that maybe the New England Patriots were going to be looking at Baker Mayfield. I'd always assumed, I think you'd always assumed Baker was going to go back to Tampa. The one thing in the back of my mind, though, was what if they don't figure it out with Evans? Do you really want to go back to Tampa with no Evans and your offensive coordinator's already gone? This feels like a pretty good piece to make sure that Baker Mayfield's back and keep those guys together.
Yeah, it's a piece to keep him around. It also frees up the franchise tag, potentially keep him around, right? They haven't used that on anybody. Winfield is a potential player that they could designate with the franchise tag. But it does mean that, like, if they are desperate to keep Baker Mayfield in the building and they can't get a deal done before free agency, they can keep him in the building if they want to with the franchise tag. So, yeah, I've always assumed that Mike Evans probably will and stay in Tampa Bay, whether it was with a deal or with the tag. They weren't going to let him hit the open market, and that's exactly how it's manifested. The Baker thing's interesting because I did bring that up at some point. That remember there were rumors that the Patriots loved Baker Mayfield at draft time. Now, maybe the guy that loved him is no longer with the team, so who knows how relevant that is. But there were talks that the Patriots were willing to trade up very high in that draft if Baker Mayfield didn't go number one. That's how much they loved him.
Right.
And it didn't end up happening, but there is a sort of connection there of maybe there's something institutionally with the Patriots that does really like Baker Mayfield even at this point in his career. And obviously they have a desperate need at quarterback and might not love sitting there at number 3, where you're taking the third quarterback available potentially who might not be somebody you're interested in whatsoever. So from that point of view, it does make a lot of sense. I still don't really think there's much chance the Bucs let him leave based off the season he just had.
All right, so we're just having fun here, jumping around, all sorts of different things to discuss.
Well, let's wrap up wide receiver for a minute, because I think I certainly have one more that I wanted to talk about as a winner from the Combine.
All right, do it.
Ricky Pearsall, the Florida wide receiver, who Jim Nagy talked up heading into the Senior Bowl week, where he was really good on this show. I think people generally look at Pearsall and think sort of cookie cutter, they label him as something. But he actually ended up testing out as one of the most athletic receivers in the draft. Like, his numbers were crazy. He posted a 4.4 140. Okay, that's fast but not blazing. A 3-cone drill in the 6.8s, that's crazy. And a 42-inch vertical was the second highest of any receiver in the draft. Like, those are crazy numbers for a guy that I don't think most people would start telling you about his athleticism. If you're talking, like, you're going to hear technician, route runner, like, you're going to hear all the cliches of white guy wide receiver. You're not going to hear the dude's also one of the most athletic guys out there.
No, when you're talking average top 5 max speeds, Pearsall's right there with Troy Franklin, right there with Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee. Remember, Hyatt was a take the top off the defense type of player last year for Tennessee and had all the opportunities to do that. And right there with Brian Thomas Jr., too, who also a big winner, right? Size, ran fast, ran in the 4.3s yesterday.
I think, by the way, we had I think his 3-cone was off on that graphic we put up, but 6.64 3-cone is what the NFL tracker has.
Pearsall.
Yes. Broad jump is 10.9. That's crazy good. 20-yard shuttle is 4.05. That's really good. Like, every number he had was basically at the top percentiles wise. Like, that's one of the best athletic workouts of any receiver in this class.
I'm not that surprised by Pearsall. I mean, as a Gator watcher on Saturdays in the fall, the Florida didn't have a ton of playmakers over the last 2 years, except Pearsall, right? He would just take over games, and actually, him and Anthony Richardson, they had some huge plays. Pearsall just taking it to the house, catching it over the middle. He's very athletic, and so I'm not surprised by any of that. Also had Pearsall, one of the greatest catches in college football history.
Yes.
Big, jumped up one-handed, took a big pop over the middle of the field. So Pearsall, he's one of those guys that I think continues to impress throughout the offseason. Had the big Senior Bowl where he kept getting open. Now the Combine. Again, I don't know where that ends up landing in this massive class of receivers, but yeah, Pearsall continues to improve throughout the offseason here.
Mm-hmm. So he's the only other receiver winner that I have.
Great. I was going to go to the defensive side of the ball for some. I wanted to highlight Quinyon Mitchell, the Toledo cornerback, running a 4.33. Again, expectations, right? So when you are a non-Power 5 cornerback with Mitchell's type of production, you do have to tick all these boxes. Now, I know he was on Bruce Feldman's freak list before the season, so it's all these pieces of information, Sam, right? We're not just rolling into the Combine. Like, a lot of our fans, a lot of people are don't know much about these players until the Combine and they see them run. But obviously the NFL knows about them. Diehard fans might know about them. But Quinyon Mitchell, it's not like he was a surprisingly good athlete, because we knew Feldman had put that out already. But he's ticking all those boxes for a highly productive non-Power 5 corner, and then he runs 4.33 with a nice 10-yard split.
Other winners are degenerate Combine measurable prop bettors, because if you are one of these people that waits for the prop bets to come out, the 40 time for prospect X, right? You can make a killing, because some of them apparently are terrible. Nate Wiggins, Combine 40 prop bet was set at like 4.55 or something, right?
What?
Yes. And
why?
Then Wiggins, exactly. So then Wiggins came out during, they asked him.
Why didn't you tell me?
You were in meetings.
I was in bed. I couldn't even get out of bed.
Couldn't interrupt you to say, hey, stop talking to the Browns. You need to go hammer this prop.
Don't tell them which teams we were talking to. It was all 32.
It's all 32.
Yeah.
Anyway, he on the podium was like, hey, what's the fastest 40 you've ever run? He's like 4.27. And then they pulled the prop. They're like, uh-oh, quick, take it down. But apparently they reset it at like 4.5 or something, flat. And then he goes out there and runs a 4.28. And it's like, okay, somebody made a lot of money on that, and it wasn't the sports book.
Plus he weighed in at what did he weigh in?
Right, 100. Anyway. But my point being, every year, there are a lot of those lines that come out. Renner being the degenerate that Renner is, the late Michael Renner, who we met at the Combine, by the way.
Not for the first time.
But generally. The late Michael Renner, makes a killing on these. He's like, oh, the props are out, let's go. Like at dinner, wherever he is that night.
Got to do
you know
something
what I mean?
to pay for his combine trip.
But my point, so if you're that guy every year, just a heads up, right? If you're into the draft, if you're into college football, measurables, etc., and you have a vague idea what these guys are going to do, you can make some money out of the props.
Taking care of your health isn't always easy, but it should at least be simple. That's why for the last few years we've been drinking AG1 every day, no exceptions. It's just one scoop, mix it with water once a day, every day, and it makes me feel great, Sam. That's why it's a big part of the PFF NFL podcast here. Great way to kick off our day. It's that because each serving of AG1 delivers my daily dose of vitamins, minerals, pre- and probiotics, and more. It's a powerful, healthy habit that's also powerfully simple. I like to drink AG1 first thing in the morning, which is recommended for optimal nutrient absorption. Fill up my shaker with extra cold water, add 1 scoop of AG1, shake it up, and I'm ready to go. If I'm running short on time, can't mix my AG1 before heading out, you just grab a travel pack. Each is an individual serving of AG1 that's easy to mix on the go, helping ensure I get my daily nutrients no matter what. If there's one product I had to recommend to elevate your health, it's AG1. That's why we've partnered with them for so long here on the PFF NFL podcast. So if you want to take ownership of your health, start with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3 and K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase at drinkag1.com/PFF. That's drinkag1.com/PFF. Go check it out right now. So defensive side of the ball, I went Quinion Mitchell, corner from Toledo, Dallas Turner, the edge from Alabama. Ticked a lot of those athletic boxes, crazy long, fast, explosive.
Turner, if you like Dallas Turner, he validated everything you wanted to see, right? Incredible athlete, explosiveness, ridiculously long arms. Did you see, there's a video of him doing the vertical jump, right? Where you sort of give it the whole arm swing, before you jump. And just like my mind was blown at how long his arms looked in comparison to the rest of his body when he's doing that. Like, no wonder he leads off every rep with the long arm. I'm going to long arm you first and then see where we go from there because my arm's like 7 inches longer than yours is. He had a great workout. And as I say, if you're a Dallas Turner fan, it's exactly what you wanted to see. He is a top-tier athlete and will work on the rest once he gets to the NFL.
Not seeing a shuttle or a 3-cone time. Did he do that? Did we miss that? So the shuttle, so my numbers here. I have the shuttle as the biggest, shuttle in the cone as the most important.
Yeah, didn't do either of those.
Okay. So those are the two for me that would move the needle the most. So that's what's interesting about all of this. If you're taking a data-driven approach, which I might. If you're taking a data-driven approach, arm length, slight positive correlation for edge defenders. Might actually be a negative correlation for offensive linemen. We'll talk about that in a minute with Amarius Mims. But the biggest driver for me would be shuttle or the cone. We didn't see that from Dallas Turner, but the idea that he ticked those other boxes are interesting.
And I think
I'm not looking at the chat right now, but I assume Walt in all caps is like just furious because we're talking about the combine here today.
He's actually just screaming Braden Fisk into the chat right now.
Oh, okay. That's cool. We'll talk about Braden. But the biggest thing with all this is you should never take a guy's, if you do your tape grade before and then say, well, he had really long arms. I think he's way better than I thought he was. Just tweak the knobs a little bit here.
Yeah, and as you say, it's also being aware of which particular drills actually makes correlate or are important for specific positions, right? It's not all created equal. Certain positions, certain drills are more important, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like edge rushers in particular, I think teams and players and agents know, or agents in particular know, the 3-cone and the short shuttle are the most important. We're going to make sure that those are perfect, so you're probably not going to do them at the combine. We're going to wait till your pro day, right? One player I thought that helped himself was Laiatu Latu, who going into the combine, he's working on a different grading scale to other people, right? So Chop Robinson, Dallas Turner, these guys are trying to run 4.4, trying to set records, trying to be at the top of the leaderboard. Latu's assignment going into the combine was just don't fail, just pass, right? Yeah. And yet he goes out there and runs a 4.64. Like, that's a good time for a guy that was, is not expected to be a particularly top-tier athlete. It's not just don't fail. That's actually legit. We can work with that. 1.62, 10-yard split, vertical 32 inches, broad jump 9'8". Like, these are fine numbers. So, job done from Latu's perspective. He showed that he wasn't a bad athlete. He might not be an elite athlete, but he doesn't need to be because his technique and those kinds of things. The tape is insane. So our friend Lance Zierlein, have we had Lance on the pod or just talked to him off?
We have, but it was years ago.
Okay.
We were locked in that meeting room that one year.
Right. Lance does the NFL, the profiles for NFL.com, and sometimes I just find his descriptions extremely funny and good.
Entertaining.
His first two strengths for Latu. Number one, menacing portfolio of movement and entry angles in his rush. That's good.
That's well said.
It gets better. Number two, Mensa level hand usage with slap, swats, rips, counters, and stabs at his disposal. So these are the reasons why it doesn't really matter if he's not a top tier athlete. But it does mean that if you're looking like being a bad athlete is reasons for NFL teams to ignore that, right? And go, I know the tape's amazing, but he stinks as an athlete. It doesn't meet our thresholds, so we're out. From Latu's perspective, just clearing that bar and showing I'm not a bad athlete, I'm an okay athlete comparison to other elite edge rushers. Now you can look at my tape and go, but I'm so much better at this stuff than any of these guys, so edge one, baby.
Yeah, I think Latu is one of the better edge prospects to come out in the last 10 years since we've started doing this.
Lance comps him to TJ Watt. Like, that's high praise, you know what I mean?
I agree with Lance. I think that's good. There's a good shout out. Good weekend for Latu.
And by the way, the other thing is there was no reports of, we ran his medical and he's a nightmare. We can't deal with that.
Right.
Like the medicals, we don't know, but the fact that nothing was leaked out suggests the medicals went well, which is his single biggest important element.
I did want to highlight Braden Fisk as well. Florida State, formerly of Western Michigan, 6'1", 292. I think Florida State has him as 6'5". This is just absurd. He had really short arms. We knew this from the Senior Bowl, 31-inch arms. That was 5th percentile. But Fisk goes out, runs a 4.78. That's 94th percentile. 10-yard split was 87th percentile. Vertical jump was 88th percentile at 34 inches. Broad jump, 9 foot 9 inches, 93rd percentile. And then 20-yard shuttle, 4.37, 93rd percentile. So Fisk, really incredible workout. He's another one of those guys where I was just kind of nodding my head, like, I knew it. I got the numbers. His athletic profile the last few years, his game athleticism rating over the last couple of years. At Western Michigan in 2021 at 98, then a 99.5 in 2022, and then a 99 last year at Florida State. And even when we can break it up a little bit, speed score, acceleration score, change of direction score, he's 99.9th percentile in speed and change of direction, 97th percentile plus in acceleration, Braden Fisk. So that was like one of those, to me, it confirms what these game athleticism numbers would have for him and the way you see him play on tape. Because he's got such short arms, he has to win with movement and everything else that he does. And Fisk, I thought, he had a really nice week this week, the Combine, just like he did at the Senior Bowl.
Did you see J.J. McCarthy had a 3-cone of 6'8"?
Yeah, he's a really good athlete.
Crazy. I mean, that's top 5, that's 6th in the league this year.
I think a lot of the intrigue around McCarthy is similar to, say, Trey Lance or Anthony Richardson, where the sample size is small. Like, the criticism is, hey, you didn't carry the team. We didn't get to see much of it. But this is a good athlete to work with. And you combine that with and JJ is not the physical freak of an Anthony Richardson or a Josh Allen, but you have the recency bias of get an athlete and you'll work with him. You'll work with his footwork. You work on his release, and get a guy that's athletic, right? And you can develop him. I think that's where a lot of the JJ buzz is coming from.
One thing I don't know about drills like the 3-cone and the short shuttle and blah, blah, blah is how many shots do you get at it? Because I'd always sort of assumed that it worked the same way as the 40. Like, you get a couple of stabs and you're done, right?
I think it's 2. And if you're going to go ahead.
Well, because they had a whole bit on NFL Network about how the last person on the field was Rome Odunze, who was trying to set this 6'6", 6'5" record that he was chasing. And he was
doing it for himself.
Okay. Well, no, because they were like, I don't know. They made it sound like they were saying, look, dude, you have a time. You can go. But it not in a way that, like, it sounded like they were still prepared to take the time if he set one, right? So can you just keep going until you hit 6'4"? Or do we have a hard stop on this?
I mean, teams can do whatever they want, man.
I guess.
They could take your worst 40 if they want. They choose to take the best one, right? I mean, it's
I'd wonder with him in particular whether it was because the way he was doing it was fouling. Like, apparently the problem was he kept knocking over the last cone when he was coming around it, just kept tipping it over. So maybe they were like, well, that's invalidating the thing. You know, as long as that's the way you're losing, we can keep going. As opposed to you've run a clean thing, it's just a slow time, you get a do-over.
Yeah, it's another massive technique thing.
Yeah. But I just didn't know, like, maybe that was the reason he kept getting an extra go, right? As long as you're fouling by knocking over a cone, you can keep going. Whereas if you just run a 6-7, we were out. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the officials would work there. All I know is we have all this combine data. I'm still waiting for the 20 times to come in. Those are still important. I can't wait for pro days now. I got to just fill in all the data. Chop Robinson, I think as expected, ran fast like every other Penn State player.
Right.
Runs a 4.48, and may have gotten himself
on that,
in the
right?
first round.
He ran a 4.48, and then I'm out.
I mean, sub 4.5 as an edge is
sure,
solid.
but
I know last year we had Nolan Smith run the 4.39.
Yeah, but to me, I don't know. Look, he was talking about he wanted to run a 4.4 flat and then run a 4.48, and then was like, no, I'm happy with that. I'm not running again. When you do that, right?
To compete. You ask him if he's afraid to compete.
Somebody did that at the podium.
Do you want to step up for media members everywhere?
What?
And denounce that?
I think that was a bad question.
Yeah.
And I think that his justification for it was kind of weak as well.
The question was we're rambling all over the place here.
Yeah.
This was
Caleb Williams was on the podium. There's like 1 million people in front of him because it's the most popular podium of the week. And the first question he was faced with was a guy yelling, "Are you scared to compete?" And then elaborated slightly on it, but that was effectively it because he's not working out. He didn't do the medical thing the normal way. It's the combine podiums are like they're bred to be a terrible environment for actually interacting. Like it's a terrible system. The single biggest problem with it is there's 1 million beat writers credentialed, and all they're interested in is whether player X met with their team. So 50% of all the questions are, have you met with the Jags, right? I feel like the entire process could be improved 500% if that question was banned and every player behind them had a board that simply listed the teams they've met with. We could do that very easily, and immediately the process is fixed dramatically. Now we can focus on interesting interactions and not, did you meet with the Titans this week, right? It's just a waste of everybody's time. But it means that when you get to things like that, right? Caleb Williams is there's like 100 reporters in front of him, and there's a chunk of them that are idiots. Just the reality of the world, right? When you put 100 people in front of you, there's a chunk of those people that are morons. Just fact, right? Any environment you want, that's a reality of the world. And if those ones are the ones that get questions, you might have some problems. His justification for that was like, I had to, if I gave like a normal question or like a normal, introductory, hey, Caleb, I would have been shouted down. I wouldn't have got the question away. It's like, yeah, but okay. So in order to get your voice heard and to, make sure your question was asked, you turned the question into something that's just a waste of time.
You afraid to compete?
Right. It's like,
answer it.
What are we getting out of that?
Yeah, it's such the whole scrum.
How do we get onto that? Oh yeah, the 40. So the thing that brought us there was, if I'm an executive, if somebody runs something and then doesn't run a second one, my assumption is that time is not a real reflection of what they run. It's like they somehow stumbled into something that was a tenth faster than they were expecting, and we're standing on it. We're out. So I would adjust that down mentally. Wouldn't you?
No.
I would assume so. Chop Robinson runs a 4.48 and then is like, having talked about wanting to run a 4.4 flat, and then was so happy with 4.48 he's not going to even risk the second one. You're not immediately going, well, that's not 4.48, it's 4.55.
That's what's really happening is like Johnny GM is over here and he's got all of his stuff sent in the scouting system, and it just says Chop Robinson 4.48. There's no asterisk that's like, well, at the presser he said he wanted to run 4.4,
no,
and then he sat on his first time.
There's a bunch of teams out there with their own stopwatch doing their timing. I'm immediately rounding that down.
I took my SATs once after my junior year, had a good number. I didn't, because you remember the SAT, SATs, you could take your best math.
I know.
And your best verbal.
Yeah.
And you just add them. I just did one straight shot.
Right.
Then I didn't try to improve the verbal. I was better at math. Like I got a model. You could tell. You knew in high school I was going to have a model.
Yeah,
And I didn't try to improve the verbal. I sat on it because I was afraid to compete. I was afraid because I didn't want to waste a whole day on a Saturday again taking that stupid test. What are we doing now? No, it doesn't matter. Good job, Chop. What else happened on the defensive side of the ball? Peyton Wilson.
Yeah.
I didn't have the list in front of me. He ran fast. He's a linebacker. We don't talk enough linebacker play here.
Don't talk enough linebacker.
He's just like a baller, too, NC State. Just a playmaking linebacker, ran in the 4.4s. That was really impressive.
And then running back Jalen Wright from Tennessee posted a very fast 40 time, but also that thing we talked about before of miles per hour at spot X. I think it's 5 yards. They measure it. He had the highest one of those in the last 2 years, which features running backs such as Achane, Jahmyr Gibbs, like really fast guys that did well last year. He was at the top of that list. So in a down year for running backs, where you're like, none of these guys go in the first round, maybe none of them even go in the second round, Jalen Wright is out here saying, I have better numbers in explosive marks than a bunch of guys that took the league by storm last year. If you're looking for one of those, here I am. Good day for him.
That's huge. We do have his weight off. That would be awesome. So, if he was 259. Shout out to Eric Froton in the chat here, too.
Eric's in the chat?
Said hello. He said hello. Shout out to Wilmington, Massachusetts.
Local rival
right next door. We've got friends and friends that know each other in various circles.
Yeah, he speculated. He couldn't confirm it, but he speculated you may have sort of shared dirt at one point or another. You know,
good for him.
Yeah, he was a pitcher. You were a pitcher. Rivals?
No, I think he was a couple years ahead of me.
Yeah, he said that.
Yeah,
but like close enough that it's conceivable.
Yeah, we know a lot of the same people.
Yeah,
he won Fantasy Sports Writer of the Year
twice.
Year,
now he told me
2 times.
I congratulated him for winning it. He was like, this is the second time.
Wow,
2-time winner.
That is impressive. And so congrats to Eric. Appreciate it. Again, it's fun running into people that actually listen to us for some reason and work in the industry. So, what else do we want to talk about here today? I had a list. Where'd the list go? Over here, answering other stuff. Looking at Eric in the chat. I'll take questions. Let's go to. Do you want to go to Amarius Mims?
Take questions.
Amarius Mims. First off, we get when you're on the media email, you get all these updates like Daniel Jeremiah is going to be at the podium. He's not at the podium. We got like 7 straight emails that Daniel Jeremiah was going to be at the podium on Friday until Friday is like he's not going to be there. We just need to start doing pressers. Just start doing press conferences.
You, and
Sam
me.
And Steve will be taking questions
now
Thursday morning at the Combine at 9 a.m.
Where are we going to take him?
We'll just do a scrum. We'll go like head to head with whoever the QB is next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we'd do well if that was the dynamic.
That'd be funny. We could do that though. Anyway, Amarius Mims.
Huge.
Monster human being.
Huge individual.
Yeah.
Smaller hands than you though.
Well, yeah, you can't win everything.
It's so broken in my brain now. Every time one of those comes out, like the dude's got 11.5-inch hands. I'm like, still smaller than Steve.
Well, what am I in Buckner territory?
12
you were the 3/4 or something.
I think. Yeah, you had the largest. Buckner, I think, still has the largest hands ever measured at the Combine, and yours were like 1/8 of an inch bigger than his.
Yeah, we still need a measurables sheet for us with all of our percentiles at like some made-up position in the, in Ultimate here. So, Amarius Mims, do you have his stuff?
No.
Popped up? I just lost a page. So he's over 36-inch arms. I did want to bring up.
There was that picture of him he was like behind the media scrum at the podiums, right? And it looks like every picture with me and you in it. Except
he's closest.
Except with muscles, right? It's like him jacked out of his mind at 360 or whatever he was.
Yeah. Yeah, true. Everyone else needs a booster seat. So over 36-inch arms. I'm from a data perspective. I'm always careful. I think there's bias in some of these numbers, right? The NFL does not allow your Peter Skoronskis and their sub 33-inch arms to play tackle.
How dare they?
Right? And if they do, they're really, really good, right? So the short-armed guys who get an opportunity to play tackle are really good, right?
Yeah.
And then the 36-inch arm guys, your LaRaven Clarks, aren't necessarily great football players, but they get opportunities because they've got this frame that we assume can be better. So that's the one thing I'm always careful about. We said this a million times during the Trayvon Walker thing. Just because you're at the highest end of every single metric, measurable, again, just don't overweigh every single one of them. But yeah, Amarius Mims.
Some real big fellas this year.
What's more intriguing about Mims, I think, though, is like he hasn't played a ton of football. When he's played, he's been pretty good. And he does look like he's built in a lab.
Yeah.
So do you want to break down what we're looking at here?
Yeah, so just in terms of size, we are talking 6'8", 340 pounds, 36 and an eighth inch arms, and a hand size that's 11 and a quarter. He then ran a 5.07 with a 1.78 yard split, and 25 and a half vertical, 9'3" broad jump. But
and the shuttle was fake. Don't read that shuttle. We have to delete it. Is it still up there?
there is no shuttle on his official.
So we officially caught up and deleted that.
We are talking about a massive human being that at 6'8" and 340 pounds does not look fat, right? Like that picture just shows him jacked out of his mind in Under Armour stuff, standing behind a bunch of small people.
Right, and again, the intriguing thing is he's got under 800 snaps in his career. He's been a good, solid player. So there is that idea that he's gonna develop with time, and he's got the body and the frame to do it. I was not trying to completely poo-poo on 36-inch arms. More is not always worse when it comes to arm length. So I wanted to did a quick look here. Tackles with 36-plus inch arms since 2010. It's a good list overall. Tyron Smith, Donald Penn, Russell Okung, three guys. I mean, Tyron Smith, Hall of Fame type.
Tyron Smith has over 36-inch arms. Isn't he only like 6? He's not tall, right?
He's 6'5", right?
Really?
6'6", 5'6", 5".
Tyron Smith is 6'5".
6'5" is the small. In my head, that's the smallest.
It's a little
you're gonna
guy.
Get. Yeah, that's the smallest you're going to get for a tackle. Is Zach Tom shorter than that?
Got to be, right?
6'4". You don't get much below 6'4", 6'5".
Yeah.
So Tyron Smith, Donald Penn, Russell Okung, three very good players. Of course, Tyron Smith may be a potential Hall of Famer. Andrew Thomas is on this list. Trent Brown. I mean, Trent Brown's similar body, but just Mims is probably a better athlete.
Right.
DJ Fluker had 36-plus inch arms. DeJuan Jones just last year. And then on the other end of it is like the guys who were more developmental types. I mean, Jermaine Ifedi was a first-round pick. He's on there. Paris Johnson from last year.
That one was
and some
surprising.
developmental types like LaRaven Clark, Matt Peart, Julian Davenport. Those are the guys who get the opportunity because they've got this frame and you hope to develop them. But the high end of 36-plus inch arm guys is pretty solid.
So we mentioned big year, big bodies this year. Joe Alt, 6'9", 321 pounds, 34-inch arms, and whatever.
So they listed him at 6'8". Is he the rare human that went the other way?
Yes, and immediately that became apparent, the question was being asked on Twitter. Is he too tall? Is he too tall?
I will say.
What's your thing? What's the data say of 6'9" people? That can't be good.
All right, let's find.
Those guys never do well.
Height above 6'9".
Yeah.
Dan Skipper.
Dan Skipper. That's it.
I'm just saying he's a guy.
He's a guy.
He's a guy that I know is 6'9" plus.
I just don't think that the list of 6'9" people.
Jonathan Ogden is going to be. He's 6'9".
Is he 6'9"?
Yeah. Jonathan Ogden's going to be the.
He's going to be the one guy that props it up.
Who was the Charger right tackle for a while? King Dunlap. As I'm because I got it loading here.
Right.
I got it loading here.
That's a shout. King Dunlap.
King Dunlap was
him.
legit.
I'd
for a
forgotten
while.
about King Dunlap
For the Chargers. I do believe, like Skipper was listed at 6'10" at Arkansas. And I do believe you don't want to have 6'10" listed there. It's like, dude, pad level, you can't get too low. You can't face these edges.
What was the great Alejandro?
Oh, yeah. He was listed at 6'10" at Army.
Right.
And then he was down at 6'8", 6'9" at the NFL.
Just like you. We downgraded him once we put a ruler next to him.
As you get older, you shrink. So that's why it is.
Have we loaded this thing yet?
No,
we still going?
It's not coming in here.
How long do we need to vamp before the thing will actually fire up a database?
Let me try it through another route here. Give me another.
I'm just saying, I generally, Jared Gaither was 6'9", right? He was also in that.
15 years of action here.
Yeah. I think Jared Gaither was also an absolute monster, size-wise.
Gaither could be right.
He was good for a period.
Fluker was only 6'8", I believe.
Yeah.
Small guy.
Little guy.
at 360. So we're just waiting here.
Yeah, just wait.
Anyone else have any suggested
Great
6'9",
content.
6'10" players?
Yeah, shout out any offensive tackle you can think of that was 6'9" or bigger.
I mean, Alt
in the
is
chat.
He's not too tall. There's no way. And then there's Cornelius Lucas, 6'9".
Of course.
The swing tackle from Washington and where else? Bears. So, still not loading.
Perfect. Well, let's move on and then circle back if it ever loads in the next 10 minutes.
You brought it up.
I did, but I was assuming that the thing could handle a simple data request.
I actually think it is fun, us sitting here shouting out the names of 6'9" players.
Waiting for a computer to load.
While it's loading, because it's fun. I've been missing Nate Solder. Has been thrown out there. I think Solder's 6'8".
Yeah, there's a lot of 6'8" people. That's the cutoff. That's my point. DeJuan Jones was only 6'8" and like 1 million pounds.
But that's another one of those, wings of the plane deals. Like, it's a cutoff because most 6'9" players are playing basketball. Who is the Steelers tackle via USC? He was 6'9" as well. He was a swing tackle. He was a backup a few years ago.
I don't know.
See, now I'm losing names. Losing more names than I've ever lost.
Jordan Mailata is only 6'8" as well. Only.
All right. Any other players we want to talk about?
Did you have any losers of the week? I had one, and now I can't remember what it was because we've just been naming 6'9" people.
I don't have a loser.
Who was my loser? This is tremendous podcasting.
It really is.
Yeah, I don't remember who my loser was.
Oh, I was trying to skew positive. I can't. I don't know why the height thing's not coming through. Maybe I could just do 6'9". Maybe that'll work.
What's his name? The Missouri edge rusher that ran a 4.95.
Darius Robinson?
Yes, Darius Robinson. That's not good for him.
It was 4.95.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought he was going to be super hype.
Right.
All the way through the
slowest edge rusher time of the week. Now, look, he's 285 pounds, so you would expect it to be on the slower end, but 4.95 is not good.
He played as a hybrid.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got my spreadsheet right here, too.
But he was getting first round. Like, we were getting a lot of first round hype. Really good Senior Bowl. Everything was skewing good for him at the moment. And then 4.95 just kind of puts a wet blanket on top of all the hype.
I'm over here. I got my spreadsheet open. I could have the 6'9", 6'10" players right in front of me the whole time.
Great.
It's not many. Stone Forsythe.
Yeah, that's not helping.
Caleb Jones from Indiana.
Also not helping.
Ryan Swoboda.
Yeah.
That's since 2014. This is in the draft since 2014.
This is what I'm saying.
Everyone else I mentioned, though, King Dunlap,
right.
Cornelius Lucas, Jonathan Ogden, of course, predate that.
Sure. I'm just saying it's not a good list of people, I don't think, when you're 6'9".
There has not been a 6'9" tackle drafted ahead of the 6th round since 2014, at least.
Really?
Brian Mahalik was a defensive end conversion, I believe, out of BC. Brad Seaton out of Villanova. Stone Forsythe out of Florida. Caleb Jones, Indiana. Ryan Swoboda last year. Jones and Swoboda both UDFAs over the last couple seasons. But so 3 drafted 6'9" tackles over the last few years because most of us are pitchers or basketball players.
And or because you're too tall to function at that size.
Or there's that.
You're walking evidence of that. So there you go. So the answer being Joe Alt is in fact too tall to be good. Fact.
Dude,
he's Jonathan Ogden.
Joe Alt is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
What else? What other names did I throw out here?
Our guy there, Mohal. We really need to find out how to say that guy's name. He asked if any rugby players do well at the Combine. So the only rugby players I'm aware of that participated at the Combine were those, I say 4 Irish guys, only one of them is a rugby player. Our guy, Tyg Leader, who was on the show last year, has been he was on the show when he was still trying to become a kicker himself, right? He had been part of one of those spring leagues. I forget which one. They're all the same now. He was part of one of those spring leagues. He was trying to make it as an NFL kicker. And then he kind of pivoted to, I'm now going to become the kingmaker, right? And he set up Leader Kicking, which is essentially a pathway program to Irish rugby players and GAA, Gaelic players to come and start kicking. So he has 4 of these guys, and they're part of that international player pathway program that Louis Rees-Zammit is, the rugby player. But they had some sort of special, I'm not quite sure why, but they had some kind of special dispensation where those 4 guys worked out as place kickers during the Combine. And they were nailing kicks from like 60 yards. Like, sounds like they did pretty well. Now, judging by their play-by-play written down sort of accuracy of how many they made, maybe we've got some consistency problems. But they've only been at it for like a month. So if you're able to nail a 60-yarder after a month of learning how to do this, and there's a potential like free practice squad spot for them to sit for a year, like these guys might make NFL kickers.
I wonder how many kicks you can actually practice before there's diminishing returns.
Right, like how many you need, like the rule of 10,000 or whatever, how many you need to hit.
Like, can you legit just like kick 1,000 times a day? Is it 500? Is it 100?
Or even simply like how many you can make before this is who you are.
Yeah, there's that too. I mean, that was the challenge with baseball, was like you can't literally throw 100 pitches every day.
Because your arm's going to fall.
Yeah, you can't do it. But other sports, I mean, you could shoot basketballs, shoot hoops all day, whatever you want.
Shoot all day.
Shoot all day, Sam, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still struggling with trying to get
heights.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I think we can move on now that you got your spreadsheet.
I know, but I want to know some of the other old names.
Yeah.
We did a good job coming up with them. I think those were all correct. All the guys we came up with.
Mm-hmm.
Any other names we needed to highlight this weekend? We got to talk Mort too.
Yes.
Before we leave.
We do.
Chris Mortensen, rest in peace, ESPN. He passed away this weekend. I thought Daniel Jeremiah and Rich Eisen did a great job with the tributes. And basically every story about Mort was like, he was the man.
Yeah, I never had any, I don't think I ever had any interactions with him, at least not real ones. Like I'm sure there's a Twitter thing here or there, but I don't think I ever met him in person. But like everybody you hear talks about that. Like specifically, he was one of those people in the industry that went out of his way to help other people. So there's a lot of, obviously people connected with ESPN said that, but also people that weren't, that were just given some kind of helping hand or word of encouragement about him. I think that has to speak extremely well to who he was as a person.
Yeah, I mean, same. I think there's enough examples out there of people that were personally touched by Mort. I didn't have any personal experience with him. When John Clayton passed away a couple years ago, I mean, he was a guy.
Yeah, like I'd had interactions with John Clayton. I mean, these were John Clayton and Mort were the sort of two original insiders, right? The Schefters, Rappaports, Tom Pelisseros, like that whole world didn't exist before those guys. They were the first like true televised insiders and pioneers.
Mort and Schefter, they were the two that would work together, right? They would do like co-reporting.
Yeah,
on
so I
ESPN
think,
for a while.
and I think I'm right in saying that was kind of Mort. That's like a legacy of Mort. So I asked Tom Pelissero one time, like, what is the deal with this? Sources tell Rappaport and me.
Yeah.
I'm like, how does that? I don't understand how that works. Do you both get the text at the same time? And he was saying that they've kind of agreed. It's like a détente that like it would silly us competing, so we just agree to sort of share the credit, right? And we each do our own reporting, and then it kind of gets pooled essentially as a credit. I think that was a Mort thing, that Schefter shows up and becomes the new guy, and rather than them competing, it was like a collaborative thing.
Yeah. So yeah, Chris Mortensen again. I would say, I'd just suggest scour Twitter, X, whatever it is, and read all the tributes to Chris Mortensen. I did find some tackles.
Oh, great. This is a smooth segue.
I know. It's all the guys we mentioned.
All the guys we mentioned.
Jared Gaither.
Yes.
King Dunlap.
Yes.
Here's the best grades.
King Dunlap.
Right.
King
Best grades
Dunlap.
since 2011.
He's a good shout. I'd forgotten about him.
6'9" plus. Jared Gaither, King Dunlap, 2 Chargers.
Those are 2 good players, by the way.
Yes. Gaither had an 85 grade in like 2011, whatever I sampled here.
Gaither was really good, and then he got injured and was sort of never quite the same, and his career petered out.
Dunlap graded 880 plus in this sample. DeMar Dotson was another one I couldn't remember. Villanueva, 80 plus grade. Dennis Rowland from the Bengals. Dan Skipper, who we mentioned. Brian Mahalik, who we mentioned. Stone Forsythe mentioned. And then Zach Sterup from the Dolphins. So
and then
half those guys were pretty good.
And then the other guys that you listed.
And then Ogden, who we have 06 data. 06 and 07 maybe?
It's Ogden's amazing. King Dunlap and Jared Gaither and DeMar Dotson were good players for a while.
Yeah.
And then everyone else stinks.
That's your takeaway?
Yeah. I mean, that's the analysis, right? We got Hall of Famer. We got 3 reasonably good players, all of whom, at least 2 of whom, were shortened by injury. And then everyone else was not good, right?
Yeah, the analysis should be Joe Alt will be just fine. Because the baseline for Alt is he's OT1 in this class. We have data that says he's really good. You watch film, he's really good. The fact that he's 6'9", you're only looking at that. Your question was, is that an eliminator?
Yeah.
And if I give you a list and 4 out of 9 are good, then no, it's not an eliminator, not even close.
4 out of 9. We also had vindication, by the way, that I have been correct in calling Olu Fashanu.
Oh,
not
Fashanu.
Fashanu. He himself said Fashanu.
You sent that to me on my deathbed, so I didn't listen to it.
Yes, yeah. He himself clarified. And by the way, Daniel Jeremiah and Rich Eisen, they do a fantastic job, but they straight up ignored him. They were calling him Fashanu. Not what he said. Fashanu.
Those guys were on air 29 hours straight for 4 days.
But they've got people that monitor this kind of stuff for them, you know?
Yeah, so blame the people. Blame the people behind the scenes.
I feel like they could have gone above and beyond and found that piece of information out. We did. I knew all along.
You did.
Anyway, Fashanu. Olu Fashanu, not Fashanu. Fact.
We had 30% off any PFF subscription using 30MDS, 30MDS, 30% off any PFF annual subscription. All right, man. I feel like we could do 4 combine shows. We can go through everybody, player by player.
That would take a while, yeah.
Anything else before we wrap it up?
I don't think so. I think we kind of covered all the winners and the loser.
And the one loser. I don't like highlighting the losers.
No, it's not as, generally I don't think that many people tank the combine anymore. I think that's a big part of it. There used to be people every year that would show up and you're like, ooh, that was rough. I think now the people that are going to do that just don't run.
Yeah, and even some of those, the Orlando Brown examples, didn't matter whatsoever. Right. He had a funny tweet yesterday about it too. All right, guys, it's been real. I'm going to Cancun tomorrow.
Nice.
So I'm out of here the rest of the week.
Yeah.
Have to go celebrate a wedding.
Sweet.
Very important. So we're going to go do that, and then you'll be here Wednesday and Thursday?
Yeah.
That sound good?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll be again here Wednesday or something. I'm on vacation. I'm out of here. More PFF NFL podcast Wednesday.
You don't care.